The dust kicked up around Elena's boots as she walked through the crowded marketplace in Fallujah. The smell of spices mixed with diesel fuel filled the air, while children ran between the stalls selling bread and vegetables. Elena Vasquez had been working as a translator for the U.S. military for 9 months now. At 24 years old, she spoke perfect Arabic and English, making her invaluable to the soldiers who needed to communicate with local people. Elena grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where her grandmother taught her Arabic alongside Spanish and English. Her grandmother had immigrated from Syria many years ago and always said that speaking many languages was like having many keys to different worlds. Elena never imagined those keys would bring her to Iraq. But after college, she felt called to help bridge the gap between two cultures that seemed so far apart. The morning sun was already hot, even though it was only 9. Elena walked alongside Captain Brennan and 3 other soldiers as they made their usual rounds through the market. They were checking on local shop owners and making sure everything was peaceful. The mission seemed routine, just like the dozens of others they had completed in recent weeks. Ask Mr. Hassan if he's seen any unusual activity around his shop, Captain Brennan said quietly to Elena as they approached a small electronics store. The elderly shop owner smiled when he saw Elena approaching. He had grown to trust her over the past few months, appreciating that she treated him with respect and listened carefully to his concerns. Elena translated the captain's question, and Mr. Hassan shook his head. He mentioned that business had been slow lately, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. As they talked, Elena noticed a young boy watching them from across the street. The boy couldn't have been more than 12 years old, but something about the way he stared made her feel uneasy. "Captain, that boy has been following us for the past 4 blocks," Elena said softly. Captain Brennan glanced over casually, trying not to draw attention to their conversation. The boy quickly looked away and pretended to be interested in a fruit stand. "We'll keep an eye on him," the captain replied. "Let's finish up here and head back to base." As they walked through the narrow streets leading out of the market, Elena felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Something didn't feel right. The usual sounds of the marketplace seemed muted, and fewer people were walking around than normal. Even the children who usually ran up to the soldiers, asking for candy or small gifts, were nowhere to be seen. "This is too quiet," Sergeant Hayes muttered as he adjusted his rifle strap. The other soldiers nodded in agreement. They had all learned to trust their instincts in this dangerous environment. Elena was about to suggest they take a different route back to base when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It was the distinctive click of a weapon being loaded, coming from somewhere above them. She looked up and saw the barrel of a rifle pointing down from a second-story window. "Sniper!" she shouted just as the first shot rang out. The bullet hit the wall inches from Captain Brennan's head, sending chunks of concrete flying through the air. All 5 team members dove for cover behind a row of parked cars. More shots followed immediately, coming from multiple directions. They were surrounded. Elena pressed herself against the ground behind an old pickup truck, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the gunfire. She had been in dangerous situations before, but never anything like this. The sound of bullets hitting metal and concrete filled the air along with shouting in Arabic from the attackers. "We need to move," Captain Brennan yelled over the noise. "There's too many of them, and we're sitting ducks here." But before anyone could respond, Elena heard the sound she feared most. The whistle of something flying through the air, followed by an explosion that shook the ground beneath them. A grenade had landed just 20 feet away, close enough to shower them with debris, but far enough away that nobody was seriously hurt. "They're trying to flush us out into the open," Sergeant Hayes called out. "We need backup now." Captain Brennan was already on his radio, calling for immediate assistance. But Elena knew it would take time for help to arrive, and she wasn't sure they had that long. The attackers seemed to know exactly where they were hiding, and the gunfire was getting more accurate with each passing minute. Another grenade exploded, this one even closer than the first. Elena felt pieces of shrapnel hit the truck she was hiding behind. The metal made sharp pinging sounds as the fragments struck. She closed her eyes and tried to control her breathing, remembering the training she had received about staying calm under pressure. "Elena, we need to know what they're saying," Captain Brennan shouted. Can you hear any of their communications? Elena listened carefully through the chaos. She could hear several men shouting to each other from different buildings. Most of it was tactical information about positions and movements, but one voice stood out. He was giving orders, telling the others to be patient and wait for the Americans to make a mistake. There's a leader coordinating them, she called back to the captain. He's telling them to keep us pinned down and wait for us to run out of ammunition. The situation was getting worse by the minute. Elena counted at least 6 different positions where gunfire was coming from, and it seemed like more attackers were arriving. The sound of footsteps on rooftops suggested that the enemy was moving to surround them completely. Elena thought about her family back home in Santa Fe. Her mother had begged her not to take this job, worried about the danger she would face in Iraq. Her father had been proud of her decision to serve her country, but she knew he was scared too. Now, as bullets flew over her head and explosions shook the ground, she wondered if she would ever see them again. The radio crackled with Captain Brennan's voice as he continued, trying to coordinate their rescue. "This is Team Alpha requesting immediate assistance. We are under heavy fire and surrounded. Our position is 2 blocks east of the central marketplace." The response came back filled with static, but Elena could make out enough to understand that help was on the way. However, the estimated arrival time was still 15 minutes away. In a firefight like this, 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours. As another wave of gunfire erupted around them, Elena realized that their survival would depend on more than just waiting for rescue. They would need to fight their way out of this trap, and she would need to be ready to help in whatever way she could. The young woman who had walked into the marketplace that morning as a translator was about to become something she never expected to be, a warrior fighting for her life in the streets of Fallujah. The gunfire intensified as Elena pressed herself deeper behind the rusted pickup truck. Sweat dripped into her eyes, mixing with the dust and debris that filled the air. She could hear Captain Brennan coordinating with his team, their voices tense but controlled. These soldiers had trained for situations like this, but Elena felt completely out of her element. "We can't stay here much longer," Sergeant Hayes shouted as another bullet shattered the truck's rear window above their heads. Glass fragments rained down on them like deadly snow. "They're getting closer." Elena listened to the Arabic voices echoing between the buildings. The attackers were indeed moving closer, using the narrow alleyways and rooftops to surround their position. She could hear them communicating about cutting off escape routes and preparing for a final assault. "They're planning something big," she warned the team. The leader just told his men to get ready for a coordinated attack from all sides. Captain Brennan's face was grim as he processed this information. He had been in combat before, but being trapped in an urban environment with limited cover was every soldier's nightmare. The enemy had the advantage of knowing the terrain, and they were using it expertly. "All right, listen up," the captain said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're going to have to move. There's a building about 50 yards to our east with better cover. We'll go one at a time, providing covering fire for each other." The plan was simple but dangerous. Each person would have to sprint across open ground, while the others shot at the enemy positions to keep the attackers' heads down. Elena's stomach churned as she realized she would have to make that terrifying run too. Private Martinez went first. He took a deep breath, gripped his rifle tightly, and burst from behind their cover. The other soldiers immediately opened fire at the windows and rooftops where they had seen muzzle flashes. Martinez ran in a zigzag pattern just as he had been trained, making himself a harder target to hit. He made it halfway before the enemy responded. Bullets kicked up dust around his feet as he dove behind a concrete barrier. "I'm hit," he called out, but quickly added, "It's just my shoulder. I can keep going." Sergeant Hayes went next, his larger frame making him an easier target. But his experience showed as he moved with purpose, using every piece of cover available, a stack of concrete blocks, an abandoned cart, a low wall. He used them all to break up his run into shorter, safer segments. When it was Elena's turn, her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold her pistol. She had basic weapons training, but she had never imagined she would need to use it. The distance to the building looked impossibly far, like trying to cross an ocean under enemy fire. "You can do this, Elena," Captain Brennan said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Keep low, keep moving, and don't look back. We got you covered." Elena took 3 deep breaths, trying to steady her nerves. She thought about her grandmother in Santa Fe, about all the stories she had told of surviving difficult times. Then she burst from cover and ran. The world exploded around her. Gunfire erupted from every direction, bullets whipping past, so close she could feel the air move. She ran harder than she had ever run in her life, her lungs burning, her legs pumping. Then the impact came. Not one, but multiple strikes hitting her body in rapid succession. Elena hit the ground hard, unable to breathe, unable to think. Pain exploded through her chest, her abdomen, her legs. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. Blood soaked through her uniform in multiple places. Captain Brennan was suddenly beside her, dragging her behind cover. Cordova, the medic, appeared immediately, his hands moving rapidly over her body, assessing the damage. "How many?" Elena managed to whisper. Cordova's face was grim as he worked. 14 that I can count, maybe more. The fact that you're still conscious is remarkable." He inserted in 4-line, applied pressure bandages, administered pain medication. Around them, the firefight raged until suddenly new sounds erupted. The distinctive crack of different weapons, precise and overwhelming. A special operations team had arrived. Within minutes, the attackers were eliminated or scattered. The team leader knelt beside Elena. "We're getting you out of here. My helicopter is waiting." They moved her quickly, soldiers forming a protective shield.